There is a connection between the reemergence of Y2K fashion, Yellowstone, the TV show, and the MAGA movement. And that connection is nostalgia. Hi, and welcome to my channel. I'm Anselm, and if you are interested in unpacking pop culture or modern media, keep watching. So, I've been thinking a lot about nostalgia and why it's been sort of in the forefront of pop culture right now. And I have to ask, is this an innocent walk down memory lane? Or could nostalgia just be another tool used to shape our collective identity? So, what do I mean when I say nostalgia? Now, as we think about nostalgia, it's sort of like the looking back on the past with some sort of irreverence, uh, fondness. It gives us those cozy feels when we reminisce. But nostalgia isn't just about looking fondly on the past, it's also used as a tool for influencing the present as well as manipulation. Philosopher Fredric Jameson noted that present nostalgia relies on our historical amnesia, which is sort of our ability to curate the past in order to fit our present social, economic, and political interests. It's not about remembering, it's about repackaging the past to fit a specific agenda. Not all of it has to be evil, but there is some emphasis on influence that's happening. There are different ways that nostalgia is used in our society, and how it operates is very fascinating to me. I want to break down in this video three cultural moments: Y2K, Yellowstone, and MAGA, just to sort of illustrate how nostalgia can be used in distinct ways in order to get us to buy, consume, and believe. So let's begin with Y2K fashion. Now, at this point, you've seen the low rise jeans, the baby tees, and even the reboot of The Simple Life. And you're wondering, why are we revisiting a time that was so tacky? It's it was bad fashion. I mean, I was alive back. I mean, we were all alive back then, but I was firmly a teenager during that time. And yeah, it was all bad. That's not a coincidence. That's what we would call nostalgic marketing. Companies love tapping into cultural moments because there's something comforting about them. We like the familiar. So they use these sort of past movements or something that we connect to in our past in order to sell us products and services. And that's the power of nostalgic marketing because you feel like you're also a part of it. No, it's not coming out of nowhere because we've all lived it, but it is sort of manufactured and nothing happens in a vacuum. We saw it on the runway and it trickled down to TikTok. And like Miranda Priestley said, it ended up in some sort of bargain bin somewhere where, you know, we thought we picked it up, or I don't know the whole saying. And on the surface, nostalgic marketing is sort of harmless. It is assertive in its measure where it's saying, like, by me, like, this is the look, this is the trend. It plays on our emotional connection to the past in order to sell us things. So are we fully aware of what we're doing, or are we being sold our memories? Svetlana Boym, a cultural theorist, writes that nostalgia is often packaged in superficial ways. I think this is incredibly important because nostalgia in the marketing sense lets us sort of revisit the past without actually thinking about what we've done before. And this is what I mean. It's more of a superficial play where we can take all of the goodness of a trend, but we won't really engage with why the trend happened. And for me, if I think about that whole Y2K era, of course, we had tacky fashion. It was the rise of superficiality. We've had body issues. We talked about that, and unkind media. But what we don't talk about is the major events that sort of led to that attitude that society sort of adopted to cope. Just the start of Y2K, literally at midnight, we thought the world was going to end. And then 9/11 happened the next year. And then the Iraq War, I think, started in 2004. And then we had the financial crisis around 2007, 2008. And then all while that's happening, there was a writer strike that led to more reality TV. And we remember the Flavor of Loves and The Simple Life. And then there was also social media starting where there were like these online communities. So much was going on. And I feel like Y2K fashion is a reflection of us trying to ignore the bigger issues. And that's why we leaned on so much color, like so much brightness, so much sort of like puppies and bags. And these, it was sort of like childish in a way. It was like we were regressing and stomping our feet. And so, what nostalgia marketing does is it erases all of that, and we can just sort of buy the pieces we remember. I can buy a piece that maybe I would have bought when I was a teenager and kind of stay in that where I had no responsibilities. The magic of nostalgia marketing is that it allows us to sort of play on the surface level without having to confront the messiness of what birthed that superficial bubble gum pink era. And now we have Yellowstone. This show is a great example of reflective nostalgia. This type of nostalgia is more passive, and that this is more sentimental, a bit more mourning. It's just remembering a past that we can never have. It often romanticizes the past too, and I think nostalgia just does that in general. But reflective nostalgia, it's more sullen and it's more like, remember the good old days, we can never get that back. And I think that Yellowstone does, I don't want to say it does a great job of it, but it utilizes this sort of nostalgia to connect with the audience. Constantly during the show, at least once or twice an episode, a character will be standing in a field and thinking about, like, oh, the good old days of the cowboys, and oh, we can never have this. And that whole show is about preserving this farm while, the new world is trying to develop the land and put condos on it. Like they literally fight against an airport and condos. So you can see how that's used as a tool to get us to watch the show. And I mean, it shows because the TV series was like a sleeper hit. So, reflective nostalgia, as Bohm talks about it, it's about mourning a memory. It's about exploring what was better. It's never bad. Like, reflective nostalgia will never be about what was bad about the past. It will always be about what was good about it. Remember when we used to blah. And while Yellowstone does do a job of sort of talking about the native people and how their land was taken away, this story is firmly about the Dutton family, which is like a white settlers who bought the land, passed it through generation. So they don't really touch on the native people, but it is about the American West and how beautiful and how the good values of the West, of the hardworking man and the cowboy. It posits that the old West was more authentic. And that's something that you bump into with reflective nostalgia. It sort of talks about authenticity and the authenticity of the past, and like that we've lost that. Once again, nostalgia is reimagined and aestheticized. In Yellowstone, we see how the American West is sort of revered, but this isn't just a memory, it's curated. And reflective nostalgia is used to legitimize modern stories. So, whenever you're watching a movie and it's talking about, oh, the good old days, and characters are just pontificating about the past, that is also a device. It's a device to legitimize the modern story so that you're grounded in it. It makes reference to the past in order to show that it is also an authentic piece, because we've already agreed that the past inherently is authentic. Now, on this story that's looking back and giving reverence to the past is also authentic. And now we've come to the most politically charged portion of the video, and that would be the MAGA movement. Now, I'm not going to discuss the ins and outs of the MAGA movement. I just want to talk about it in the context of nostalgia. The MAGA movement is a type of restorative nostalgia, and that nostalgia is more aggressive. It's usually used by groups or political regimes, and it's all about reclaiming the past and restoring it. So we saw in reflective nostalgia that it was just kind of reminiscing and thinking about it, but it knew inherently that we can never bring the past back. We can never have those good cowboy days. But restorative nostalgia says you can have that and we will have that by any means necessary. It uses that emotional connection to people's childhoods because I think that's what it is. We all think that the past was better when we were young because we didn't really understand how things worked. So, restorative nostalgia is just about like, oh, remember when you used to ride your bike? You can have that now. You can have that for you and your kids. That's me being, very simplistic, overly simplistic, but that's kind of the attitude. The conceit of it is that it's also wholly manufactured. When I think about the MAGA movement, and this is my opinion, I'm sure other people have written about it, but I think about the American 1950s. I feel like that's the time that they think America was great. And when I read something like Fredric Jameson's Nostalgia in the Present, he also discusses the 50s and sort of the culture that we've created or the story, the narrative that we've created around the 50s of this sort of leave it to beaver Americana, suburban life where the new neighbors would be greeted with a pie. He argues that the 1950s were rebelling against this idea of the 1950s. When we actually look at historical texts, the 50s was about rebelling against Eisenhower and his administration and the complacency of it. There was the civil rights movement. There was this attitude of the sort of ethnocentricity of whiteness that was being rebelled against by most people in America. So it wasn't like a time of pleasantries. It was a lot of civil unrest. And I think America was changing so much because we were coming out of World War II where a lot of people got to see the world. I mean, for better, or for worse. A lot of people came home from seeing horrible things in the world. And they realized that their country wasn't the shining beacon that it was kind of made out to be. So that's why there was so much protest. But the actual culture, the television, the movies, the art that came out of the 1950s was sort of the opposite because art isn't really a reflection of right now. It's sort of a commentary of what was. So I think a lot of what we see from the 1950s is one, was trying to placate people. Two, I think it was a reflection of maybe like the earlier late 40s to early 50s and a reflection of how the 50s actually were was probably shown more in 60s culture. So it's really interesting how in restorative nostalgia, most of it is sort of rooted in misrepresentation of a past. And people are trying to forcibly reclaim it. But aside from the MAGA movement, restorative nostalgia has been used throughout political movements in order to galvanize people against a common enemy. And the enemy is progress, the enemy is change. People who are trying to move forward are the enemy, and they're taking something away from you. They're taking your memories, they're taking your culture, they're taking your lives. Basically, essentially, they're taking your essence of who you are. You are this in the past, and these people who are progressive and want to move forward, they're trying to take away your past and everything that you know. So that's how restorative nostalgia is used in our society. And we're currently seeing it right now because people are clinging to kind of remember when, eggs weren't expensive or when they felt like crime wasn't that bad, even though crime is down. Nostalgia isn't just this warm, fuzzy feeling about the past. It's a deeply cultural and political force that shapes the way that we think, whether it's through marketing, reflection, or restoration. Nostalgia is a tool that shapes our identities and worldviews without us fully understanding that. As we navigate a world that's increasingly influenced by curated versions of the past, I think it's important for us to understand what we're being sold. I want us to stop and think what is being shown and why. Because maybe not everything is sinister and bad, but I do think that we need to be conscious because if we're not conscious, then anything can be used to manipulate us, to get us to, like I said, purchase, consume, and believe. So the next time you're buying something or binge watching a TV show, just ask yourself, what are they really trying to sell me? How am I being influenced? And am I making material things a part of my identity? So if you found this video the least bit interesting, like and subscribe, please. I also did a full deep dive on my Substack. I will link that down below. I'm really interested to see what you guys think about nostalgia in pop culture and how it's being used as a tool, or maybe you don't agree that it's a tool. But either way, I want to hear from you. And if you like videos like this, where I'm going to be trying to do more deep dives and unpacking culture as I see it, please keep following because this can only get better. So, yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.